Comrades, revolutionary greetings to all of you. It's a pleasure once more to connect with you, to continue with our class. It has become more of our class every day, so we know that we must be attending a class. Difference with the days and the normal classes, there's no teacher. So there's a free space where we are all thinkers and philosophers who are trying to philosophize. As of late, I'm becoming more philosopher because I use some of the terms that sometimes people don't understand. But I think the benefit of this class is that it has sometimes been enabled or has enabled us to look at the problems of Africa in another different dimension. So how you think of the solution is totally different with how you could think of it in an ordinary level. But also how you understand the society and what's going on across the continent. It has also given us some of the different angle of looking at things. So permit me to recognize the presence of our comrades who are with us. As usual, Brother Carrington is with us here, resident physicist, actually from Kenya, back currently in UK. We have General Nunaki, our Raspala, the farmer. I know he's from the farm already, now he's in the city. But it's from South Africa. Raspala has donated for us a land. We need to think of what we should do there. And he has said he always plant ganja. So if you want to plant marijuana there, we can still plant marijuana there and sell. We also have Sawino from Namibia. And we have Sister Tapua from South Africa, from Zimbabwe. So the East and the South is already represented. We are waiting for the West part and the Caribbean to be with us, but we will not wait any longer. We'll continue with our conversation. Now, today we are getting at Cartesian philosophy. Now, over the past few days, we have been struggling, or been trying to look at various philosophies, especially we came from how humanism, because our concentration initially was on humanism some times back. And we learned about humanism and Renaissance. But then we moved down to now how humanism could lead to what we call democratic capitalism or corporate socialism. That led us to one of the proponents of democratic capitalism, who is Leibniz, with his philosophy. We looked at his philosophies a bit. Then now, last class we looked a bit now to the other side of it, which is Descartes and his philosophy on social cooperation. Now, today we will continue with where we left, and the paragraph we intend to share our thinking on is a paragraph on the screen. But for the benefit of doubt, permit me to go back a bit and do a recap of where I've said we've come from in terms of reading. Then we can continue our reading now in these two paragraphs. It's not a long journey. So I'll do a recap a bit. They say that, I'll go a bit far, but no problem. I'll start with this Locke, where Locke come in. They say that, but just as Locke political philosophy was a humanist attempt to assert the personal and independent dignity of man and make man not God, the reference point of political organization. So in his empiricist philosophy, he attempted to make man the center and the source of knowledge. Since knowledge is thus not a matter of divine revelation, but one of human mental activity, man's intellectual independence and dignity was by this token asserted. I have said that in the face of the humanism, with the Renaissance developed, the church preserved herself by making a concession here and a compromise there, thus avoiding a head-on collision. The church became subtle, and when seeming to endorse the philosophy of humanism, tried to place God at the center. She ran with the hare and hunted with the horns. In the philosophy of Berkeley, empiricism appears to be endorsed, but is in fact strictly speaking denied. For however deeply Berkeley said that material objects were agglomerations of ideas of sense, he told us that it was really God who put the ideas in our mind. Sense was completely odious in the philosophy of Berkeley. This was necessarily so because for him our bodies were carried in our mind. The stage could not therefore be set for sensation. For impressive were the insinuations of this Berkeleyan doublespeak that the grateful church rewarded him with bishopric. The power of the church could still be felt, and philosophers like Descartes and Leibniz, inspired by fear of being recognized immediately as undermining the social power of the church in favor of humanism, prudently suppressed their definitive works which only saw the light of the day posthumously. I have already said that humanism branched off into democratic capitalism and corporate socialism. The two philosophies of Leibniz and Descartes provide further illustration of the way in which this happened. Now, Leibniz believed that the universe consisted of an infinite number of units, which he called monads, and each monad was a spirit, but monads enjoyed different levels of consciousness, and matter in his philosophy was a collection of spirits which were in a complete state of unconsciousness. He was an idealist. But that was not what constituted to his contribution to democratic capitalism. For this, we must turn to his remarks about the nature of monads. According to Leibniz, every monad is completely self-contained and is completely windowless on every other monad. Every monad is furthermore invested with a private law of its development, a law which provides sometimes for the dimness of other monads at a time when a particular monad luxuriates in well-being. And this whole arrangement is sanctified by the principle of pre-established harmony. In social terms, this means that every individual has an inalienable right to develop according to his nature, even if his development requires the suffering and subordination of others, either in a political or in an economic sense. It is in this way that Leibniz philosophy contributes to democratic capitalism. On the other hand, in the philosophy of Descartes, support is given to the corporate socialism. Descartes begins from the position that reason is the same in all, and that fundamentally we are equally able to perceive and appraise the same truth. We do not have private truths. We all share public objective truths and pursue them. And even when, because we have not paid full attention to the matter on hand, we have not yet ascertained the truth, we must cooperate with others in supporting the demands of order as conceived by them. Consequently, Descartes says that while he was busy doubting everything in order the better to appreciate what was true, he still conceived it necessary to cooperate with others in supporting the stability and order of the society. Comrades, that's where we've come from. And now today we will continue from the paragraphs highlighted, which I will now read very slowly. Now, by multiplying examples to show how there is a social contention, implicit or explicit, in the thoughts of the philosophers, the history of philosophy, as I sketched it earlier on, suddenly enjoys transfusion of blood and springs of life. These philosophies appear in situ, not as abstract, ethereal systems, but as intellectual weapons implying social purpose. It is evident from the foregoing that Cartesian philosophy represented the most radical break in a social sense from the hegemony of the church and her aristocratic allies. The spread of Cartesianism in the form of free thinking therefore assured that there ensued in France competing philosophies which endangered an acute social and ideological conflict. On the other hand, there was the oligarchic philosophy of the church. On the other, the egalitarian philosophy of Descartes, with its removal of the region of truth from mystic revelation to mathematical and public demonstration. The acute social and ideological conflict so generated could only be resolved by revolution. Thank you all once again, comrades, who have joined us. And that's the reading for today. Welcome, Sister Myra. Welcome, Brother Coco. Welcome, Elder Glenn. And welcome, Elder Sam, for joining us. And yes, I've read the paragraph for today, and I wish we start by sharing our thinking. Brother Carrington, I'll always start with you, because sometimes you provide some other further basis for more engagement, and I think you look at it, I don't know, in third eye, and then you'll come with the fourth eye and the fifth eye trying to look at the same. So, Brother Carrington, are you able to try to dissect for us some of the few things? If there's anything that members would like us to look for the definition first, please let us know. In situ. Brother Carrington, what is in situ?
In situ means inside or internal. So if I say I am going with the bus in situ, I am inside the bus, sort of. It comes with it. Yeah. But
Okay.
you can confirm that, please, Brother Pigeon. Okay, thank you very much, brothers and sisters. Thank you for having me. Thank you, Brother Pigeon. Brother Pigeon is trying to be a little bit political with my contribution here. It's not too much. We are still in philosophy where I'm struggling a lot with the content. So, but we can please feel free to exchange ideas. They're always very helpful. So, I think, and even this is reproduced in the first paragraph and the previous pages which Brother Pigeon has read, which set very good context for what we are discussing. This idea, and I think now we should completely internalize this idea that your philosophical system, and every human being has a philosophical system, either examined or unexamined. You have not thought about it, or you have thought about it, but everyone has a philosophical system. That is how they think the world is organized. Has implications for how you view politics, has implications for how you think society ought to be organized. And the Osajefo is trying to come to insist, basically in the previous, basically 10 pages, I think, to insist on the very close interaction of philosophy, ideology, and policy, and therefore the social reality we see in the ground. It is not the product of accidents. It is the product of deliberate thought together with accidental planning, okay? So it is not just the product of accidents. And I think this is important. So he's trying to show that philosophical differences, for example, between Descartes, the French, and I think the other one was it Berkeley? Brother Pigeon can correct me. The conflict between the previous two.
Leibniz.
Leibniz, yes, the German, yeah. So the conflict between the two philosophers has implications for our political and ideological systems. And sometimes these implications could be catastrophic. That is, it could be the difference between cooperative, democratic, social organizations of society and capitalistic, democratic, but nonetheless concentrated organizations of society. So very, very innocent looking philosophies could have dangerous implications for human beings, for Africans. Now, and I think that is an important point. So when considered in of themselves, these philosophies appear in situ. When considered in of themselves, they are not abstract. They are not ideas of people in ivory towers trying to tell us stories about some other world that doesn't exist and it is not practical. Actually, opposite from that, philosophy is a dangerous thing because it is an intellectual weapon, right? It is very, very hard for a soldier to control a philosopher. It is very easy for a philosopher to control a million soldiers. Okay? And this is the problem. This is the fundamental problem we are facing, because how you change, if you change the way somebody organizes their mind and thinks, you do not need to use force to govern them, as has been said for the neo-colonized African mind. So that is why philosophy is important. In the second paragraph, he just basically fleshes out this idea that Cartesian philosophy, which he has introduced as being more accepting of cooperative socialism, cooperative democratic socialism, is more useful, I guess, in this regard, is in tension actually with older philosophies, which, mind you, Cartesianism comes into primacy in Europe probably something like 300, 400 years ago. So for the previous 1,000, 1,500 years, up to including Africa, we are organized on the basis of religious and monarchic concentrations of power, right? And therefore, for a long time, we accept a certain philosophy that leads us to accept that there are natural concentrations of power, and these concentrations of power are in the monarchy, aristocracy, and the clergy, most importantly. And this is where this acute sociological and ideological conflict comes in. Once you have a philosophy which is saying, well, this is just one viewpoint, there are other viewpoints, and ultimately it is not God that privileges a viewpoint, it is a human being that privileges a viewpoint, then automatically you are making very you are making political statements with very, very deep implications. And in France, as some of you who are familiar with the history know, a few decades from now, and I think we are going to discuss this in the next paragraph or something like that, a few decades from now, from this elucidation of Cartesianism, the king's head ends up cut off. The queen's head ends up cut off. The clergy is dismantled in France because of the change of the philosophical views of the majority of the public. And this is why a change of thinking is more important than a change using a military coup, or a change using violence, or a change using the ballot even. Once the population starts thinking in a different manner, every institution, whether it has weapons, whether it has money, whether it has power, will have to adapt itself to the changed thinking of the population. And this is hopefully what is happening in my lovely country, Kenya, and my lovely continent, Africa. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Brother Carrington. Let's do a bit catch up on what you're saying. So, the first paragraph saying that, of course, by multiple examples. So, probably Nkrumah is referring to examples he has given us all along. Now, he says that to show there is a social contention.
Yes.
Now, hope you can take us back a bit to some of the contention, because Nkrumah has listed first Socrates. But even before Socrates, remember, we've been having guys like Thales, Anaximander. We've been having all those people, and then we come to Socrates. Then even from Socrates, we posit then Plato and Aristotle. Then we go now here, we are getting, of course, the likes of Akina John Locke. We had John Stuart Mill, and now we are having the initial, just the previous one is the Leibniz and Descartes. So what it says, of course, we have seen some social contention, and I think you have shared this with us. On all these philosophers are having contrary opinion, you see. Now, the problem is here, he says that the history of philosophy, as I've sketched early, suddenly enjoyed transfusion of blood and springs to life. What's that?
So, it is about how people think about philosophy and its history. And I think the Osajefo is doing something very important here. When you're writing a history of philosophy, most historians of philosophy or most philosophers just explain the philosophical tensions, what the ideas, the abstract ideas, and how they developed with regard to each other. But Kwame Nkrumah is trying to say, no, 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 no. These philosophical tensions are actually much, much more interesting than that. They have social, political, economic implications. This is where the life comes from, that life of politics, of society, and of economy.
When he goes ahead, okay, when he goes ahead and say now that the philosophies appear in situ, not as abstract ethereal system, but intellectual weapons implying social purpose. I think you have mentioned a bit on when you say that philosophy can be very dangerous.
Yes,
But how do you see then that some of the philosophy Nkrumah had taken us through were actually weaponized for social purposes? How can you see that? Maybe in the previous discussion we've been having.
So, I'll use one example to say the quote unquote revolutionary example, and the second, the reactionary example. So, the revolutionary example, this is Athens, the small Greek city-state. So, you have philosophers like Socrates, like Anaximander, you've mentioned them, coming up with philosophical systems, and even famously we have spoken about it, Aristotle, coming up with philosophical systems that have very, very deep social implications. And the famous Meno, right? You end up coming to a situation where a slave is a human being just like you and has possibly the same rights and duties to society just like you. And that is very deep. And you can see that the Athenians, the Greeks, really, really struggle with these concepts of equality and servanthood. And they get just a little bit further than other European societies because of engaging with these philosophical concepts in that time, that is. Now, on the other hand, you have Aristotle and especially Plato building up a system, a philosophical system about access to the truth and how the universe is organized, that the church then weaponizes for its own purposes. It leads an entire culture for entire millennia, for thousands of years, Europeans to accept that there is a natural order of things. There's a natural order of things with the clergy and the monarchy at the top. And that is the way God has organized the universe. Once the minds of people are captured like that, it is very hard to step out of that system because you're thinking using that frame, using that philosophy. And that is why philosophy is dangerous. And you can extend this, of course, to the African continent and the philosophies of neocolonialism, as is usually discussed.
Carrington was bottom up and hustler narrative a philosophy.
Yes, it was. It came, or at least it came from an implied philosophy that, according to the constitution, Kenyans have the same rights and duties regardless of their station in life, and therefore are subject to the same support of the state. Yeah. So that's one part of it. Yes, I will say yes.
So if I use Gen Z 2022, it will be also another good philosophy.
So it is a response, it is a refusal to view the world. Actually, the Gen Z are a very good example, although this is not discussed in depth. Of course, people are still trying to understand the Gen Z protests and revolution, but it is a refusal to see the world the way our parents saw the world. The parents of the Gen Z, I'm not a Gen Z, saw the world. They accepted corruption. They accepted tribalism. They accepted manipulation by international institutions. Parents accepted this as a basis of life. Even me in my 30s, I had begun to accept that change is going to be very difficult or very slow. But Gen Zs have refused that philosophy. And it makes things very, very confusing for the people in power.
Now, is it somehow implicitly same to what Cartesianism is talking about here? That revolt.
Yes, because the political class in Kenya and in most of Africa, and I'm sure most of you will agree, sometimes feel entitled, sometimes feel that they are at the top because either God or natural processes chose them because they are somehow special. They are entitled to that position. And because they start from this philosophy of leadership, it is very, very difficult for them to be servant leaders.
Okay. Now, in the last part of that statement, there's aspect of the church philosophy on the one side. Of course, I believe that the church philosophy talked here, is it the idealism we've been talking about and the egalitarian being the materialism?
Actually, that is the, I would call the battle between materialism and idealism the root. So a materialist is going to struggle very, very much with explaining why one human being is better than the other. But an idealist does not have any such trouble at all. So the root of the ideological conflict lies in the tensions between materialism and idealism. You're exactly correct.
Okay, thank you. So the last part I will engage with you before I go to the next person. The last statement ends with saying, can only be solved by revolution. Now, what do you think is that revolution that can solve the problem? How can you say it can be like, or how does it, can it be manifested, that so-called revolution that resolve the differences between philosophies of idealism and materialism?
Thank you very much, Brother Pigeon. And so I mentioned this very, very briefly, but the idea is that once a significant chunk of a population has changed its mind about a certain philosophy, right? It comes into conflict essentially with the power structures, okay? And this conflict is usually there because the very, very thing that strengthens power structures, it's like you going to a tree, then completely cutting out the roots. So the tree just is supporting itself by the violence of its weight. Otherwise, if somebody just touches it a little bit, it will topple over and fall. And this is the problem when the philosophy of leaders is deeply, deeply undermined. They feel very, very threatened, right? And because of this, it gets them into a little bit of trouble. And therefore, because these two ways of viewing the world, right? These roots are unacceptable to this other group of people. What do these people sit down and talk about? You remember in the Gen Z revolution, the political class was always saying, our sons, our daughters, talk to us, let us talk, let us talk. There's really nothing to talk about because the roots are completely unacceptable. The roots are rotten. So because of this, the tree has to topple, essentially. And the toppling of the tree is what we call a revolution.
It's not a reform, it's a revolution.
Because the thing that comes after reform is me trying to fix the puncture of my car, right?
So we don't fix the puncture.
Yeah, it is buying a new car here.
Thank you very much, Brother Carrington, for sharing your thinking with us. And welcome, Brother Kwame and Sister Ida. Thank you for joining us as well. Now, I'll go to Sister Tapua. I believe you've been having some stable network for some time, and I'll allow you to go second. Sister Tapua, hope you can be able to share your thinking with us. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Allow me to pass for now. I'll come back later. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Uh, Let me get to Sister Myra. Sister Myra?
Brother Preaching, I'm just catching up, so I'll listen fast, if that's okay.
Oh, okay. So it's gentlemen first. Brother Carrington, Brother Coco. And I hope through the engagement with Brother Carrington as he was trying to share his thinking, we can also be able, some of us as we read this, also be able to come up with some questions or some thinking that you like to share. But yes, Brother Coco, please go ahead.
Greetings.
Greetings, comrade.
Greetings. Revolutionary greetings to all of you tonight. I don't know why the sisters are giving us so much space now after International Women's Day, but I won't take offense. It's respect, so I think it's two-way. I also respect you ladies. This is interesting. We see a continuation of what Dr. Nkrumah has been doing for the past couple of readings, couple of paragraphs that we've been reading. You will have seen that he is doing lots of contradictions throughout, sort of contrasting one theory, one philosophy against the other, contrasting sort of opposites to give us readers a chance to analyze and review all of those philosophies. In so doing, he doesn't prescribe. He's not prescribing, but he is sort of giving a broader summary of what each one of them presents. For instance, here he's talking about egalitarianism, and we have seen egalitarianism before. We understand what egalitarianism is about, and he is contrasting that to oligarchy, the church oligarchy's philosophy. So let me start there and talk about oligarchy. Under oligarchy, we see a few people. We see a situation where a few people hold power within a country, within a political framework, whatever you call it. So, for instance, right now, we are seeing the millionaires and the billionaires emerging in America to be the rulers. That's an oligarchy in itself. It's more or less what we're seeing in Russia and the oligarchy of people around Putin who held more power. The idea is where power is, dispersed equally amongst different people. And let's not forget what we were taught before, that Descartes, he had to sort of conform in order not to be seen, in order not for people to understand what he was doing, what his views were. And he kept the church family within it. In so doing, he was seen as someone which the church could use again to adapt and remain relevant to thinking. But what he has done is to come up with what is called Cartesianism. That Cartesianism is his own philosophical thought. And that Cartesianism, it has different aspects to it. One of those is dualism. And in dualism, we are talking about the body versus the mind. And let's not forget what he said, cogito ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. It's more of the mind is there, and I use my mind, therefore I have reason. There is rationalism involved in what he's saying. Then again, let's go back and think about the English philosopher. The English philosopher is the one who was trying to take out God and bring in the human element. By taking out God, he was saying, we as humans, we sort of grow. We grow our reasoning, we grow in thinking, we grow as we go and have thoughts and reasons and experiences. Then we start to develop. Whereas most people and the church itself contends that it's only God who has given you reason. You can only reason because God had made you so. God has put reasons in your head. But people like Descartes and that philosopher who I forgot his name, he's there. You mentioned him when we were reading, Brother Pigeon.
That's the name.
One of those who.
Is it name?
Locke, yes, Locke, John Locke.
Okay.
Locke, yeah. So they come up with taking out the mysticism or the making it simple. There is a human is there and a human can think. So in the paragraph we have also read, we are told again about sorry, before I go to about the paragraph itself, there is a methodical doubt. There is doubt in what Descartes introduces. Descartes allows people to doubt things, people to ask things, people to question things, all right? Which actually helped, because then we are talking about social contention there. Under social contention is a philosophical framework as well. It allows or it elaborates how the society deals with conflict, it deals with differences. And that's where you and the brother Carrington were talking about protests in Kenya. We're talking about the riots. We're talking about people starting to stand up. Is the social contention? Is what is happening? Is it fair? Is everyone getting what they are supposed to be getting? Are we getting a fair share of the booty in the nation in which we live? And this is where Cartesianism introduces dualism. In dualism, we're talking about there is the rich against the poor, right? And the rulers against the ruled. And hence, when we talk about social contention there, it brings that conflict into play. And let's not forget about what we said. One of the older ancient Greek philosophers said, life itself is about constant conflict. It's always about constant conflict between the two conflicting elements. And it is a matter of who comes out on top all the time. There is a right word for that in philosophy. I forget the name, but right now I'll just talk about dualism, because the duality is that there are two opposing sides all the time. But with in situ, what Carrington has already explained, that it's nothing abstract. It's part of the situation, it's part of the philosophy. You have to analyze that within the setting in which you are analyzing everything. So in the same case that we are talking about Africa right now, everything should be looked at from in the context of Africa. Why is Africa poor, even though, why are Africans poor, even though Africa is the richest continent in the world? So here we are given a blueprint to say, do not take everything lying down. Think, use your brain, and question everything. And know that social contention is not an accident. It's not something that sits outside somewhere, which only a select few are allowed to have access to. Everyone has access to that. We can question things, and if we are to change anything, we have to question it. Revolution can only happen when we realize that something is not right. It cannot just happen like that. It doesn't just happen out of the blue. It's because this has been a build-up of several things that have been happening up until the moment when the situation erupts into a revolution. I yield.
Thank you. Brother Kwame, in case you want to come in anytime, feel free to do so. Sister Tapua?
Yes. I think I'm ready to make a contribution now. I'm mainly focusing on the last sentence of the first paragraph. These philosophers appear in situ, not as abstract, ethereal system, but as intellectual weapons implying social purpose. The reason why I'm focusing on intellectual weapons implying social purpose is because I'm thinking we need to focus on who we are and what we're doing. Because we need to be aware that what we're building here is for a social purpose, and that we need to be moving with intention to understand that we are working with the two philosophies that have been spoken about, and particularly in the Zimbabwean context. When I came back from Europe, I was hit in the face by the extent to which the church holds people's thoughts and minds and processes, and how pervasive it's been. And I'm not in any way standing to judge, but I'm saying we need to understand what we are working towards. Because like my brother has said, you always have two opposing sides. And what we're trying to build up here is a change in thought. And therefore we need to come up with a strategy that helps people to
Sister Tapua, have we lost you? I can't hear Sister Tapua. Can anybody confirm if you can hear Sister Tapua? Maybe the problem is...
change their way of seeing things and affect that means what? Can people still hear me? Hello?
Yeah, we lost you.
Hello?
We lost when you said strategy.
Okay, yes. I was saying we need to be very intentional in how we strategize towards the Africa that we want. Because here we've got a people who are very spiritual, a people who then are being controlled by religion, because I'm trying to acknowledge here the difference between spirituality and religion, and understand that our work starts with working with people's minds. And that is going to help us to strategize so that we are able to effect a revolution, because that's what we need. That's my contribution for now. I hope I'm still audible. Thank you.
Thank you, Sister Tapua. You are pointing at the church. And I think if I get what Cartesian was trying to do is to overthrow, but you have also seen in the past how the church has refused to be left behind. It has always found a way to continue maneuvering. Now, based on that aspect that the church has survived all along, as a revolutionary and based on what you're seeing in Zimbabwe, do you think there is still possibility of defeating the church or finding a way on how the church should follow the human? As how it has been said that then there was a concentration was brought back to humanism rather than God, but the church accepted humanism but still held on the God aspect. What do you see will actually be the solution of the church influence to the people, as you're saying how they're manipulating the people? And how do you think we can go about it, knowing that the church has survived for this long?
I think Decker himself gives us an example, because at some point he realized that coming out in the open at a time when it's not strategic would have his ideas killed by the church. So He maintained his presence within, took part, but was subverting the system. And someone had the courage to come out and bring whatever he was thinking to mind after he was gone. So we've got a situation where there is no way, absolutely no way you can stand up in Zimbabwe and express your thoughts vis-a-vis the church. So, like I've always said to some of the kids I interact with, it's a club. You go in there, use the infrastructure that's there to start sowing the seed with intent, because you know what it is that we need to do. So that's where I'm at. I think that's how we can work with it, because you can't stand up to fight it. It's too big.
Okay.
At the moment.
Okay. Thank you, sister, for sharing that you're thinking. Let's hear what Raspala has to say. General Anunnaki, you have been here. Raspala. General Anunnaki? Okay. Elder Sam, please share with us your thinking.
Thank you, Brother Pigeon. Good evening, everybody on the platform. Yeah, I've been listening, Brother Pigeon, and I think most of the inputs made by the previous speakers are really clarifying a lot of things. But I think for me, the essence here is Kwame Nkrumah is trying to show us or reveal to us that, especially in philosophical world, there's a thin line between truth and lies. And this is where, where he uses those two words that look the same, but are basically two opposed words, implicit and explicit. Sometimes the lines are blurred between those two words. And most of our people need to be seen, taken through to understand exactly what the two words are. But the major issue here, what I saw is that the dilemma of this dualism that Cartesian philosophy was preaching had a problem. If we take that every time we talk, we say life is all about the two opposites, struggle of the two opposites. He's speaking about dualism, but he says the mind and the body are separated. They are two extremely, completely different. So the challenge for him was to show that there must be an interaction between the two if life has to continue. And this has been what we have known from the beginning, that the struggle of the two opposites is what makes life and what leads to development, what makes to what some of us call revolution. So this is where the crisis was. And in fact, if I take it, I'm emphasizing this. If I take the South African situation, the African National Congress, the oldest liberation movement in the continent of Africa, somewhere between 1912 and 1955, something happened to them. The struggle for a total liberation smelted into what they called the Freedom Charter. The Freedom Charter, which was a philosophy that says South Africa belongs to all who live in it. If you look at this from a broad perspective, yes, but there's a fundamental issues that are hidden. Because if you say in 1955, South Africa belongs to all who live in it, it means even the Europeans that came and colonized the country, this country belongs to them. So if you are a revolutionary and you can't see through that, then there's a problem. Your revolution will come to naught. And this is the same situation. Up till now in South Africa, these philosophies are blurring the lines between our people and the total liberation of the African people. And even if when you speak now, we had the budget speech that failed 2 weeks ago. Now it was tabled. But even now, our leaders still see that instead of taxing these big companies, corporate companies, no, taxes must still come to us, the poor people. And this is where you see that the philosophies that we are following, if our people are not properly explained about these issues, we will always be stunted by achieving the goals of the revolution. And then lastly, I think there's an essence of what he's saying. Despite all this, the contradictions in a society will continue struggling amongst each other. And as time goes, they will sharpen themselves. You know, I was saying to my comrades here in South Africa that some of us are opposed to the African National Congress. They have been in power, and maybe we have come to a stage where we want to give up and continue. But I was saying to them, because there's a struggle, the poor of the poorest will always find a way to come when those contradictions have sharpened. Like as I'm saying now, if the budget is not going to satisfy and bring life to our people, those contradictions will sharpen. Whether we lift our arms or we don't, the contradiction will make us to be revolutionary, and ultimately there will be. You know, that's how the French Revolution came. They were oppressed fully and completely. But when those contradictions sharpen, because the struggle of the opposites will continue, then revolution will always come. Thank you.
Thank you. So, thank you very much for sharing with us, Elder Sam, including lighting this with what's going on in South Africa. So, you say the revolution is the climax of the tension between the two. When the tension reaches the climax, then the revolution happens.
Yes.
Okay, thank you for that. And, okay. Brother Kwame will remind us in some times forward to this text. Of course, Brother Elder Dr. Nkrumah gives us an example on how you can call, because then the revolution will lead to the liberation. Because remember, there are key aspects in this book that is of very interest to us, is the unification, the liberation. And Nkrumah, sometimes in front there, he explains about how you achieve a liberation. And the liberation is actually the tension between the positive actions, which you call the revolutionary actions, and the negative action, which you call the counter-revolutionaries. So when they reach a climax, actually, then one must outweigh the other. So when the positive actions are more than the negative actions, then you attain that revolution. But of course, I think he's also very conscious, as he tells us in the future somewhere there, that you can never completely diminish negative action, which means you can never completely kill or defeat the counter-revolutionary forces. But what you can do, you can just outpower it or outnumber it, so that their actions are actually suppressed. That's why we've learned that dialectics never stops. There will always be dialectics. Just that you have to tickle it a bit, as now we are seeing there's a struggle here between those who are tickling towards egalitarianism and materialism, that those who want to resist on idealism. And that is a contest we are seeing from Socrates, we are seeing it in Plato, we are seeing it in Aristotle, we are seeing it coming up with Akina John Stuart Mill, we are seeing it in John Locke, we are seeing it moving around here now what Leibniz and Descartes are talking about. The society is in a constant struggle, and maybe that's why we say there's not a perfect society or finite society. The society is always in this revolution. I don't know, sometimes back we came across something called evolution by revolution. But I think it's very important that you're highlighting that aspect as well, because that element of which stage then the revolution happens. And some would say the Gen Z revolution in Kenya was a revolution. But at what stage? It means at the moment when these opposing ideologies are at the peak, now it leads to a revolution. Whether it is violent or peaceful, we've seen many countries sometimes gain independence peacefully, others went violently, but a revolution is just a Cartesianism in one way or the other. But Sawindok, yes, come in as you share your thinking as well. Brother Kwame, feel free to come in anytime. Sawindok?
Yes, greetings to everyone. The social contention, will it be the same as contradictions and tensions. And they say the philosophies, when they are in situ, is there a case that they would be out of situ? When they are in situ, they appear not as abstract ethereal systems. If they are out of situ, what will happen? Will they still be the intellectual weapon implying social purpose? And Cartesianism, is it a philosophy, ideology, or is it somebody's name? Let me just end there for now before I come with two more answers. Maybe they will shed more light to make me understand what this paragraph is all about, because I'm in total darkness. As you
No, you are in light. You'll never remain in darkness as usual. Yeah, you've asked very interesting questions. Permit me, first of all, I'd shared the meaning of Cartesianism, which, if you can see my screen, is the philosophical and scientific tradition derived from the writing of Descartes. It is characterized by rationalism, asserting that knowledge can be driven or derived from reason, and emphasizing on metaphysical dualism of mind and matter. That is Cartesianism. Now, when you ask whether the philosophy can be in situ, and I think the opposite of in situ maybe is the abstract, because in situ is inside or it comes with it, and there's either concrete and abstract. I don't know if that is possible. Maybe somebody can help answer that. But Sister Tapua, are you coming to please help a bit answer some of these window questions? Go ahead, sister.
Partly, yes. I would like to add on to, you asked me a question about what we can do vis-a-vis the position of the church. And I'd said part of it is being in the church. But what I'm also wanting to add is what others have said, that the conflict pushes people. And in the Zimbabwean context, we have 80% unemployment, formal unemployment. These 80% have resorted to vending, and people are vending anything everywhere, in the streets, daylight. People are fighting with the councils. And it reminded me of the system that was there in Rhodesia, where you couldn't be in an urban setting unless you had a pass, permit to be there. They're almost going to the same level, because they're now saying these people cannot be here unless they have a permit, unless they're paying licenses. And people are it's beginning to dawn on them that what we've called a revolution that happened 40 years ago was not quite what we have. Therefore, we need to do something, so that even at this point, people are beginning to realize that prayer alone is not going to help them. Fasting is not going to help them. Because right now we have people who had invested their $10 in buying tomatoes and they can't sell them. And a lot of the things that the vendors, and therefore that means we have to be in the wings all the time. We have to be positioned correctly with the people to help in situations where they need to be helped to understand. Because what they're faced with right now is rotting produce. But they're buying SANU-PF cards or the other political party cards. They don't quite have the time or the energy to be thinking about anything else except putting food on the table and roof over their heads. We are occupying a privileged position here where we can sit back and think. Now what we need to do is be with the people, find ways of getting people to understand what is happening to them. And then they can head the revolution, because we cannot on our own as intellectuals lead the revolution. We sow the seed. So we need to come up with strategies of how best we can sow this seed. I think that's where I'm going to end for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Sister Tapu. Still, I'll seek guidance from Brother Carrington. This question of in situ that Brother Kam is asking.
Yes. So in situ, let us start with a practical example that makes sense out of philosophy, so that it's not confused with philosophy. When I say in situ, I'm talking about inside something, considered in of itself. For example, the system of the bus in situ, the system and the passengers and the bus in situ means that the passengers are in the bus. They are being considered as one single system, okay? But the opposite, ex situ, means out of. The system is being considered out of itself. You've stepped out of the bus and you're considering and understanding the bus from outside. The Osajefo is saying, if we just consider philosophy internally alone, in of itself, inside of itself, it necessarily has political, social, and ideological implications. So considering it ex situ is trying to step out of philosophy and add other things to philosophy and see how philosophy interacts with these other things. And this is the traditional way of trying to understand philosophy and its interaction with society. The Osajefo is saying, no, let's reverse this thing. Even if you consider the philosophy itself, it is political, it is social, it is ideological.
Thank you for that. Sawindok, is that helpful?
Not necessarily. In situ, I understand it as something that is at its right place, where it is supposed to be, but not necessarily the example of in the bus. I don't know if there is a difference in what I'm saying and what
So
Brother
the passengers, yes, that is correct. The formal definition of in situ is at its place. But for you to say that something is at its place, you have to consider its environment, correct?
I don't know.
Okay.
Can we give an example?
Yes?
Yes.
So when you say the passengers are in situ, the passengers are in the bus, okay? The passengers are ex situ, the passengers are not in the bus. You can see they've stopped being passengers. So that is the difference. Now, philosophy in situ, that in its proper place, in its proper properties, is necessarily political. What I understand the Osajefo to be saying is that politics, ideology, and all of these things are necessarily parts of philosophy.
Okay, thank you. Let me get
Sorry, excuse me. Could you repeat the last bit of the sentence, that they're not necessary what? I didn't hear, sorry.
Politics is necessarily a part of philosophy.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Can I come in with a live example?
I want to go to Brother Elder Glenn, but Brother Kwame is mic is on. Brother Kwame?
Yeah, let me explain.
I can wait. I can wait, Comrade.
Ideology comes from philosophy. There are two philosophies, as we've all understood so far. Idealism, which insists that the universe is made up of ideas or spirit. And that philosophy has implications for ideology. The contending philosophy
Brother Kwame, we've lost you. Brother Kwame? Brother Kwame, we can't hear you. Okay. Once you are able to, let me just unmute you because I think you will be trying to speak, but we can't hear you. Elder Glenn, go ahead. If Brother Kwame gets his mic properly, then you can continue with him.
Did Mr. Tapu wanted to go?
Yes.
He wanted to say something.
Okay.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Right. I'm just wondering whether people can help me here, because my understanding is correctly in situ, yes, means in its rightful place. I'm thinking of the Donald Trump and what's his name, the Tesla guy's situation. Right. They are in office.
Elon Musk.
Elon Musk, thank you. They're in office expressing and presenting a certain philosophical position, but we see it in their actions. In other words, although we're talking about philosophies and these are things that happen in the mind and that drives our action, we can only see what their philosophy is from when they are in place, in the rightful place, in the political system. That's when we're able to see what the philosophy they're explaining is. I mean, they're representing. That's how I'm looking at it. Because a lot of people would then, in an African context, a lot of people will say, I'm in the rightful place because I'm the person who did this, who believes in that. But when you look at their actions, that's when you see that they're neo-colonialists and their philosophy is totally different. So in their rightful place, you actually see the weapons, the intellectual weapons that are fashioning the social purpose. I don't know. That's what I think. Thank you.
Thank you.
Brother PJ.
Yes.
Is that an ideology or a philosophy that those guys, those two guys are trying to drive, Donald Trump and Elon Musk? I'm completely lost.
Brother,
I think Brother Kwame had said we've got philosophy at the top of the pyramid, and then we have philosophy either being idealism or materialism, and then there's the expression of the two. You can see and link whether it's idealist or materialist based on what is evident. And we can then work backward from what we see Elon Musk and Trump doing to work out whether they're being idealist or materialist.
yes.
And that's philosophy.
As Brother Kwame had said, and I think we have come across as well, there are only two philosophies. And those two philosophies then guide in terms of ideologies. So based on the philosophy you pick, we can see it by your ideology. The church, the oligarch, and all those aspects are ideologies that are derived from an idealism philosophy. So back to your question, Sir Windhoek, those are just ideological, we call them conceptual instruments of ideology, but they are driven from a philosophy they are taking. If they were to take a materialist philosophy, then you can see that in their actions. But based on their actions, you can tell they're guided by idealism philosophy, but those whatever they're doing are just ideologies are tools of philosophy. Elder Glenn?
Yes, thank you. Just really going back to the text, I find it interesting, the section that says that Christian philosophy represent the most radical break in social sense from the agony of the church, and their aristocratic allies. And I look at that and I'm thinking that, of course, there is a certain sense, there is a control by the aristocracy of church and religious philosophy, but I think the greatest allies that are to the church, all churches, all religions, seem to be the poor and downtrodden. And I'm not sure how that's addressed here. But I wonder, one of, and I would consider him a philosopher, maybe others wouldn't. Gil Scott Aaron said that the revolution will not be televised. Now, clearly, he said this some years ago, before some of the invention and availability of the means to televise or to record a lot of the things that are going on, good and bad, around the place. So I wondered, in the context of reading some of the philosophy here, which many times we see it's out of context and out of time. Well, people might disagree that it's relevant now, but I would question that if it's entirely relevant. So I wondered how do people see Gil Scott Aaron's statement, which surely should be seen in the context of the time when this type of technology wasn't available, and the suggestion, and perhaps it was in those days, that the aristocracy were more the allies of the church rather than the ordinary rank and file poor people who are looking for some salvation and are very much more eagerly aligned, as I see around the world, to religious doctrine. So I just wonder people's thought on that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Elder Glenn. Just to pick up a bit from what you're saying, of course, you have put into context what I'll answer the part of the statement you're referring to, the gentleman you mentioned, in terms of the televising the revolution, but I'll hope any Brother Carrington or anybody else can come to help me in the second question you're asking about Cartesian and the church allies. But I believe, as you've mentioned, of course, that he said revolution will be televised. I think we might be then not putting that word into context. Because as you're saying, when he talked of not being televised, television was just a metaphor used or an example he used in terms of a revolution, which means basically the true revolution is not physical, it's mental. And that's what I think even Bob Marley and the rest talk about. So how do you televise a mental revolution? Which then goes, because from mind we have cultural revolutions, which means somebody stop doing the practice of what's going on here and there, because the mind then controls the person, and it's the mind that frees the person. But we have often put the revolution in the angle of physical. And sometimes we realize that even the so-called physical revolutions are not true revolutions. Because maybe people went in the forest like the Mau Mau, fought physically, we removed the government, but actually it was not just a revolution, it was a change of turns. The people in the street of Sudan, of Zimbabwe went out, removed Mugabe physically. What happened? The new leaders and the citizens are still thinking mentally that the West should still come back and support. So I think in one way or the other, if I can interpret that his position, probably he was sending something to us as revolutionaries, that the revolution is not only physical, and that we should not only depend on physical evidence as a show of a revolution. Because I think to Speaker, the revolution might be beyond physical, and therefore it might be something in the mental or something like that, and that mind, you can never televise the mind. Basically, I'm thinking, from my understanding, it might be he was sending some serious message to some of the revolutionaries.
I would add that it would also be an attempt to say to people, you can't sit at home and watch the revolution. You need to get out and be part of it. That's how I read it. But again, I'm saying it in context. You know, people would have even more opportunity to watch. We watch what's happening in Gaza, the most televised genocide, or the first televised genocide. We saw what's happening in Kenya. We saw, as you say, to some extent, what's happening in Sudan, but a bit more closed. But, you know, in general, fighting around the world gives even more opportunity for people to sit at home and not be part of it. And as you say, maybe perhaps be even more an intellectual exercise rather than a participatory exercise. What I'm really raising it for is in the context of the text and the context of its time, even Osajofo's time, and now, how much of it do we simply equate or you think is utilized in our current circumstances? I just want to throw that out there. But I found the idea that we see not, it doesn't say main allies, but it does say the allies of the church as being the aristocracy. Clearly, as far as control is concerned, that's correct. But I think there's the alliance of that are the poor and so on. Thank you.
Thank you, Elder Glenn. Let me get to the answer up. Let me get first of all in that order, but I hope anybody will come in to try to also answer what Brother Glenn is trying to observe here. But let me start with Sister Ida, whose hand was up first, Brother Coco, Sister Tapua, and then Elder Sam, in that order, so that I can finish with the hands, then go ahead. But Brother Kwame, feel free to come in anytime.
Yeah, I want to clarify what I was clarifying before my system went down.
Yeah, please go ahead first.
So and I'll be brief. So there are only two philosophies on our planet: idealism and materialism. Idealism insists that the universe, the constituents of the universe, that which the universe is made from, are spirit and ideas. The contending philosophy is materialism, which insists that the universe is made up of matter. And by matter, we mean scientifically, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, the big carbon. These are the, if you like, the building blocks of our planet and of our universe. Now, the point is that idealism, in its insistence that its roots are in spirits and ideas, has implications for ideology. And an ideology, if you like, the set of ideas in this case that will be used to, if you like, run society as a whole. And so idealism has implications for an ideological framework. And in terms of human beings, it says that human beings are fundamentally unequal, and that there has to be a hierarchy in society, with some people at the very top, the apex, if you think of it like a pyramid, the apex, a few at the top and the majority at the bottom. That is the, if you like, the ideological social framework that derives from idealism. And God, or the Son of God, the Christ, the King of Kings, is, if you like, at the very top. And him, the angels, and then humans, and then, so there is a kingdom, as it were, structured under idealism. Now, for materialism, all that is nonsense. Materialism says that all human beings are equal and that there is no fundamental inequality because all of us come from carbon. Yeah, brother Carrington can explain more if we want. And that all of us are equal. So there's no such thing as a hierarchy. If there is a God, that God is within us. All right, it's inside us, it's not outside us, and so on and so forth. So there is an ideological implication of materialism, which basically says that because we're all equal, the social structure must promote equality and equity. Now, what is politics? Education, the military, environmentalism, education, and all these, they are all instruments of ideology. That's how we need to understand it in conscientism. In brief, there are two philosophies. They have implications for ideology, and all the social tools with which modern civilization uses to organize itself: money, finance, education, housing, roads, all these things, transport, they are all instruments of ideology. That is why in an aircraft, just give this example and I'll stop here. That is why in an aircraft, there is a first class, there is a business class, and there's an economy class. What do you think it means? Yeah, what do you think it means? First class is standing for the aristocracy. The middle class, business class, that's what it's telling you. And then we, the ordinary people, we are the economy class. So you find that even the way in which the aircraft is organized, you can see the ideology playing out. It plays out in education. You have primary, you have what they call private schools. Then even within private schools, we have elite private schools for the aristocrats and so on. And then we, the ordinary people, attend the public schools where we have to, there are even no books to read and so on. So I'll stop there. So in short, there is philosophy, and then there's ideology, and then there are instruments of ideology. Thank you.
Thank you, Brother Komi. Sister Ida, please go ahead, based on time. Then Brother Coco, then Elder Sam, then Sister Tapua.
I'm sorry if it seems that somehow this word always sort of gets me mixed up and it escapes me. But I wonder if you could highlight hegemony and give us the explanation of it. Hegemony. Because I think that it's in the second paragraph. I think that paragraph is really the crux of what I'm reading in what we've got today. That one.
Yes.
Hegemony. Thank you.
A hegemon, as a noun, is, if you like, one who is in control, one who has domination of something. That's basically what
one group. Okay.
That is who a hegemon is. It can be an individual, it can be a class, it can be a group, it can be a nationality. But basically, so hegemony is what the hegemon does. The control, they have control over everything, as it were. So that's what it means. I hope that was helpful.
Okay, thank you. Because I always seem to, I hear it and I think I understand it. And then it comes up again and I think, what does this really mean? Okay, because I think that paragraph, it's evident from the foregoing that Cartesian philosophy represented the most radical break in a social sense from the hegemony of the church and its aristocratic allies, and the bit after it as well. And I'm thinking to myself, here we go again, that the church is, at the top. But I'm thinking, why has he used that word?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I'm listening. Sorry.
Thank you.
So the hegemon there is the church as an institution. And it exercises domination and control over that society.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Brother Coco, go ahead.
Thank you. For Sister Ida's benefit, right now we are living in the US hegemony because the US is pushing for a unilateral world order in which only one power is in charge. So that's why it's called a US hegemony. And BRICS is trying to fight out of that US hegemony and establish a multilateral world order. Is that clear?
Yes, thank you. Because I know that recently I keep hearing this word and I keep hearing this word, and it's just not registering exactly what it means. So thank you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just add on to the meaning of the word?
Windhoek still online? So I think Sir Windhoek was asking about the in situ, but so essentially the sciences, physical sciences, you can actually put them under the microscope and study them. But when it comes to social sciences, it's different. When it comes to things like politics, economics, you cannot put them under the microscope and study them. Hence, we use lots and lots of data to study them. But if we go out there and see these things happening in real life, they are happening there where they are. We are not displacing them. We're not taking them from where they are happening and then putting them under the microscope to study them. We are seeing them live. I hope that helps. Okay, then let me go to Brother Glenroy. Brother Glenroy, I know you said something about the poor. The poor are being exploited by the church. The poor are not in alliance with the church. The church aligns with those with power. It has been like that for centuries. That's what they do. Lots of people have asked me and said, okay, who comes first? Who puts who in power? Is it the church or is it the rulers? But you have to realize that the rulers are only a minority most of the time. But for their power, their rule to be legitimized, they need a higher power to give them that legitimacy. That's when they bring the church in. It's the same with what was happening with Henry VIII here, who wanted to marry another woman, wanted to divorce his wife, and the Catholic Church did not agree to that. He decided to establish his own church. I know there was a purge of the Catholic hierarchy at the time, but what it has done is he has established the church belonging to him, the church seeing him as the anointed one. But it goes back again to that hierarchy which Brother Kwame has referred to. The church is being used to legitimize the rulers, the minorities over the majority, because if it was just the minority, then the majority could overthrow them. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go to Elder Sam. Elder Sam. From Elder Sam, we'll go to Sister Tapua. Elder Sam.
Thank you. Brothers and sisters, I just wanted to find out, would I be correct to say from what Brother Kwame was saying, therefore, in the world we know of two philosophies, capitalism and socialism, if I follow what we have been saying, and therefore,
No,
when we talk
no, brother Sam, hold on. Capitalism and socialism, you said, yeah? They are not ideologies. They are instruments of ideology. So they are economic systems that derive from the ideology that derives from the philosophy. And so when you subscribe to idealism and hence social hierarchy, you can see from there how the economic system will be capitalism, because capitalism essentially means that a handful of people control the means of production. and everybody else is either labor or unemployed. And if you believe that, if you subscribe to materialism, you can see from there the implications for social equality and hence the economic system, which is socialism. And we have mentioned this previously as Ubuntuism. So those are the things. So I just wanted to clarify that capitalism and socialism are not ideologies. They are economic systems which are instruments of ideology. Thank you.
Sir, Elder Sam, proceed. Elder Sam, please proceed.
Or socialism. And I'm saying this because throughout our studies, we have said, if you are individualistic, which is the idealistic way in philosophy, you are saving capitalism. And if you are a materialist, you will be working towards socialism. And why I'm bringing this, I wanted to go to the issue of abstract and that thing in situ, to say these philosophies must be able not to be there in the air. These philosophies must be able to solve the concrete conditions of the people on the ground. And if it is for the individual materialistic individualism, then it will be for capitalism. And therefore, the people will reject them. And if they are for the complete freedom of, or they solve the problems of the majority of the people, then they will be for the revolution that the people will follow. Thank you.
Thank you. Sister Tapua, please go ahead. Then Elder Glenn.
Thank you. Just to maybe share how I've managed to come around understanding hegemony or hegemony. I see hedge in that word, and to hedge is to confine, to control, to put within certain parameters. So for my sister's benefit, if you see hegemony, just think of the hedge. The church putting the hedge. Certain people, America, trying to control what's happening around the world. And then my other contribution is the poor might appear to the poor as allies, but that is not what's on the ground, because you will see from what happens to the poor within the church that they're being exploited. Because you will see that whatever comes to the church does not materially benefit the poor. The poor are given spiritual food, whereas the people in charge of the church have cars bought for them, their money is contributed towards their welfare, their medical bills, but the ordinary person has hands laid on them. And yet they're deceived to think that they're in charge. And I think that's where deception comes in. And that's where we from an external point of view, we actually see that is the poor propping the church, but they don't realize it. And they actually are not propping the church. They're made to feel that way so that they're easily exploited and they're vulnerable. On the point of the television, it is true that the revolution will not happen on the television for a number of reasons. One, the people in charge of the television are the people who are in power, and therefore they control what is publicized. I mean, there's
Sister Tapua, we are losing you.
more stack the world where opposition is. Say, have you heard? I think I'm on television. Should I start from there? Hello?
Yes, proceed from there.
All right, right. I was saying what we need to remember is what the philosopher who was referred to as, or the person who said that revolutions are never done on television, was correct in a lot of ways, because the TV is controlled by the people in power. It's a weapon, it's weaponized, just like social media has been weaponized against the African Revolution. So what we see is, if it appears on television, by the time it appears on television, like the Gen Z, there'd been a lot of things going on in the background which were not published. And a lot of people, particularly journalists, we've got examples in Zimbabwe where it's a crime to spread the word and publish certain information. Therefore, the television should be seen for what it is. In a lot of instances, it usually occupies a certain position depending on which one. Fox News on the one hand, CNN on the other, Al Jazeera on the other. They all seem to be looking at things in a slightly different way. So that's my point in terms of making sure that we understand the role of television, which is why, like our brother was saying, we need to have our own internet. We need to make sure we have our own system in place that supports our.
Okay, sister. Thank you. Elder Blaine, then Brother Coco.
Thank you, and thanks everyone for coming back. I mean, what I will do, I won't press the Gil Scott-Heron. It's a song, and I would advise. I mean, I suspect I'm of a certain age and perhaps remember the song more than most. But I would suggest, if you have time, just tap into your smartphone, Gil Scott-Heron, the Revolution, or even just his album. Many philosophical songs that I think are important to our understanding even now. But I really put my hand up to say to Coco and now Sister Tapua, you've misunderstood what I'm saying. I'm not saying that the alliance, which I retain, exists between the poor and the church and religion in general. I'm not saying it's an equal alliance. I'm saying that people go to church every Sunday or whenever it is, Saturday, Seventh-day Adventist or whatever, are predominantly the poor, and they do so in alliance with the church, believing that something will become of that a relationship or that alliance or that support for the church. By no means am I saying it's an equal alliance. Am I saying that the poor are getting equal benefit? Because I said at the time that the aristocracy control the church. It's not an alliance. It's not you know, the local vicar meet with the local lord or whatever and come to an agreement. The aristocracy controls the church and tells them what direction to drive the poor in. But the poor, either because of perception of life hereafter, or indeed, you know, because the church is supposed to and do sometimes go around and help people in poverty. I've seen some of that and think that the church are genuinely willing to do that. So what I'm saying is there isn't a perception, and I think it's been ignored by the statement that seemed to only have the aristocracy as the alliance to the church. I'm saying another alliance, indeed, the aristocracy are controllers of the church, whilst the poor are in alliance in some hope and aspiration that their life will be improved through this alliance. I totally agree with Coco in that it's an unequal alliance. It's not even, it's not fair in any way, but it is an alliance as far as the poor are concerned, because they think they will either get something here in life or in the future. And that's the type of alliance I'm talking about. I'm sorry if I wasn't very clear my first time around. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Can I come in there?
Oh, Brother Kwame, please first. Go ahead.
Yeah, Brother Glenroy, your exposition that you've just made, it was my understanding as well. When you talked about alliance, that was my understanding. You were not saying, you were saying that there was some kind of alliance. And even members here in the past have alluded to that by saying that the ordinary people go to church and they are praying for change, which will never happen, and so on. When people are going to church and praying, what is that? Are they not in alliance with the institution? Of course they are. So that was my understanding as well. And like you said, it's not to say that they all get equal benefits from it or that they're not oppressed. Sometimes people do align with their oppressors. They do. The entire new colonial class in Africa is in alliance with the imperialist oppressors or the new colonialist oppressors. They're oppressing us, and we are aware of that. Anyway, because of the time, I wanted to draw your attention to something. I wasn't sure if this has come up because I joined much later, and so on. So, do we all know who Descartes is? I mean, do we really know who the man is? Because remember that Constantism, in looking at philosophy, is telling us at all times to look at the concrete situation that gave rise to a philosophy, a philosophical expression, and therefore an ideological expression of that philosophy. That is what chapter 2 has always been about. And so in the example after example after example, we are being told, have a look at what led to this person or persons coming up with the philosophy that they did. So we need to understand why did Descartes come up with Cartesianism? Why? That is a question you need to answer. Then when you answer it, then you can answer the question why Africa needs a particular philosophy and its ideological orientation. Because that is a central question. And there's enough time for me to go into that. But all I would say briefly is that I don't know if we are aware that it is Cartesianism that led to the French Revolution of 1789. Are we all aware of that? The French Revolution, they chopped off the head of Louis the 15th. Yeah, thank you. Louis the 15th, who was the king of France. They cut off his head and his wife, Marie Antoinette. Right? And so Cartesianism is what led to that. Why? Because the crown of France, controlled political power, and the church in those days controlled almost 40% of society's wealth. So you had the church controlling the wealth and the aristocracy led by the king controlling political power, and the people were oppressed. And this is a key point which we need to bear in mind. According to the church, only they had access to the truth. Yeah, this is what they are saying, yeah? That if you talk about truth or knowledge, it only comes from the church. And where does the church get its truth from? Your guess is as good as mine, the Bible, scriptural interpretation. Now, because of time, I'll just speak for another 1 minute and then stop. Now, Descartes was a mathematician. And for all of you who went to school and did graphs, where you drew the x coordinate and the y coordinate, if you didn't know, those coordinates are called Cartesian coordinates because it was Descartes that invented that. Yeah. So everything that to do with graphing theory, graphing this, all that came from this Frenchman. Okay. And yeah, so basically what he was saying was that the church does not have monopoly over intellectual knowledge. We can find intellectual knowledge through mathematics and mathematical deduction. I will stop there because of time. And this is what kind of led to the French Revolution, because it gave them the intellectual tools to challenge the power of the aristocrats and the church. What we consensus have to do is we need to find a way of making what we believe in, put it out in such a way that it causes the kind of revolution that we also want in Africa. Thank you. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Brother Kwame. Elder Glenn, we are having 4 minutes to go. Elder Glenn?
Yeah, I don't need to come back on anything. As Kwame said, that's the point I was trying to make. It's not an equal alliance, but people go back every Sunday or Saturday or whatever. So there is something obviously there, whether it's true or not. But again, I would advise anyone who's not heard the song, Revolution will not be televised, just to have a listen to it, because I think it carries many, many messages that are still important. So I'll leave it there, Chair, if anyone wants to use the other 2 minutes.
Thank you, Elder Glenn. If you can maybe text the name of the artist in the chat so that we can pick it there. But I think that aspect of revolution not be televised is a serious conversation that can be we can have any other time to check on what is the real meaning of that, because I think many people come with their own thinking in line with that. But please put in the chat that title or the name of the author of the song. But Brother Raspal has not spoken. I don't know if he's not in a position to do so. I will be allowing him to speak. Raspal, are you in a position to say something? Okay. Sister Myra, did you say something as well? Sister Myra?
No, I'll just listen. Thank you.
Yeah. Chair, Brother Pigeon.
Yes.
I was hoping Sister Myra would have reminded us of solipsism, because he spoke about it at length when we came across Descartes. I think therefore I am, and then Sister Myra threw light on the psychological implications of that. So I was actually looking forward to Sister Myra saying something about that. But anyway, thank you.
Well, my mind, as I was listening, I was forming. I was also analyzing, and a lot of what I thought has already been said, and that, in a nutshell, in situ for me says we can't rely on other thinking. We have to come up with our own thinking as Africans. Materialist. And then what Brother Kwame said, that we have to find a way, that last sentence that says the acute social and ideological conflict generated revolution. We have to find a way to instigate this revolution by introducing into society the thinking that we want, that we think is African, that we know is African, which is Cartesianism. So that's, yeah, my sentiments have already been mentioned by other people. Thank you.
Thank you. Sometimes they say the disadvantage of being a chair is that you don't speak. But sometimes is that also through others speaking, you get to learn more. So I will not be able to speak because I've engaged this text in various questions I've been asking Brother Carrington before, and I've also been able to learn a lot of what other speakers have said in line with this. And I think Brother Kwame has drawn us to the central point of this. What is that our, of course, philosophy and ideology, and how do you package it properly in order to inspire that revolution that you want? Because we can agree and discuss on which form of a revolution will it be. Does it mean an armed revolution or a mental revolution? But I think it's still central to this conversation. And I believe we can be able to answer to that question even as we move along. And when we'll be finishing chapter 2, we should be having the answer to that question. Comrades, I don't have much to say. Just permit me to appreciate everyone who has actually spent their time to be with us. and
Can
everyone.
I just
Oh, Glenn, your hand is up. I thought it was a legacy hand. It's not black anyway. It's just maybe in a minute. Glenn, Elder Glenn.
Oh yeah, it's just you. Yeah, it's in the chat, the song.
Okay.
If you wish to play it on our way out. Sorry. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. No, I'll have to play it on Saturday. Probably when we start the class on Saturday. I'll play it on Saturday. But comrades, I want to thank you all. And I really appreciate your attention and your contribution. So let's continue coming. I think let's continue learning because there's a lot that we learn. I never knew decades before I reach here, but today I'm knowing who is Decade, and I know Sister Ida is learning more as well. So let's look forward to this Saturday, where we will be having, of course, program on for infrastructure development in Africa. I know there are other programs that I've been aware of, the meeting of the diaspora and ECOSOC, I think so, that will be going on the same Saturday, but they are in different times, so we can have also time as well. I'll be able to share with you the ECOSOC program that Brother Sifio is doing, so that we can join there. Those who can join earlier if they have time. Then in the evening, after that, we can also engage on our PIDA, which is Program for Infrastructure Development in Africa. And yes, next week we'll look for more and more of this. For your information, I have shared in our library all the books of Descartes. They're in our library. All the books of Leibniz are in our library. All the books of John Locke are in our library. And all philosophers we come across every time, I ensure that I supply their books in our library for further readings. So thank you all of you who contributed to this conversation, starting with Brother Carrington, who started us off, Sister Ida, and every one of us. Please, let's continue doing this, and let's meet again next Thursday. Without much ado, permit me to end it there. Brother Kwame, unless you have anything else. Brother Kwame? Brother Kwame, do you have anything else? Okay. Maybe silence from Brother Kwame means there's nothing else. So thank you very much, and let's meet next week. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.